The X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. And we're coming to you live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My guest this hour is John Lee Schneider, and he is the author of Extinction. It's his first published novel. He has many interests, as you'll find out during the next hour, including dinosaurs, computer art, and martial arts. And John Lee Schneider, welcome to the X-Zone. John, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Welcome to the X-Zone. How are you tonight, John? I'm doing great. Thanks very much for joining us. All right, tell me about Extinction.
Well, Extinction is a science fiction novel which deals with a futuristic post-Armageddon world, and it's populated by dinosaurs. There are pockets of surviving humans living all over different parts of the world, but they are reduced to primitive status and thus are easy prey for an alien invasion. And that's the general setup.
All right, I have to ask you a question here. If this is in the future, where did the dinosaurs come from?
Well, there's all places to get dinosaurs. This is actually the subject of the first few volumes in the series. Extinction is the fourth chapter in a 6-book series, and the first several books deal with the resurrection of dinosaurs through genetic engineering. The first two are set in modern times. But by the time Extinction rolls around, the setup is more like the beginning of the original Star Wars movie. There's a brief explanation in a scroll, and it jumps right into the action, and all that stuff is already there.
Do you think it's possible to genetically engineer dinosaurs?
Oh, certainly. Genetic engineering is really a matter of using stuff that already exists. DNA is really the primary element in which you need to recover. It's been done with advanced animals such as sheep. So
yes.
the problem you run into is acquiring the genetic material. So, like movies like Jurassic Park, this genetic material was acquired by a billionaire who was able to afford to buy tons and tons of amber and extract DNA from blood drinking by insects that were trapped inside. Now, in practical application, you have to have the billions of dollars to spend in the first place. And scientists who have tried it with 4 or 5 insects that have been found have met with a very limited success. There has been some genetic evidence found, but that may have been contamination through bacteria, and it's very difficult to recover. So unless you have thousands and thousands of specimens to draw from, it's not a real practical approach. But recently, it's been discovered that some genetic material has actually survived in the fossils themselves. A young T-Rex female had a leg that was broken for shipping to a museum, and analysts discovered that they actually had soft tissues preserved inside. Now, this was something that was assumed to be impossible, but was never put to the test because people are reluctant to break priceless fossils.
Yeah.
But since this discovery, a number of other specimens have been investigated, broken open, and they've discovered similar tissue inside. So the genetic material is there. It's just a matter of acquiring enough to produce a dinosaur.
All right. Would it be that much different from cloning a lamb to cloning a dinosaur?
Well, actually, cloning a lamb would probably be more difficult. It is a more advanced animal. Cloning a dinosaur would probably be very analogous to cloning a bird. And chicken have been subject, for example, to a lot of DNA experiments. They've been bred for size and, like reproductive ability. So a lot of the work has actually already been done. It's just there have been cases where people have done experiments. Since birds retain certain genetic, they retain genetic memory from their dinosaur ancestors. They've been able to activate genes that have gone dormant. They've produced chickens.
Take a step back in time and discover old Florida cuisine at Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere. Enjoy delicacies such as frog legs, gator tail, catfish, and swamp cabbage, or enjoy the more traditional cuisine like hand-cut Angus steaks, ribs, and seafood. Join us for breakfast with a southern flair featuring sweet potato pancakes, biscuits and gravy, and much more. Planning a party? Marsh Landing's private dining room can accommodate groups from 8 to 80 people. While you're visiting, enjoy the historic pictures, artifacts, and stories that line the walls. Marsh Landing is truly a unique experience. Marsh Landing Restaurant, 44 North Broadway in historic Fellsmere, or visit marshlandingrestaurant.com. Marsh Landing, Old Florida cuisine at its best. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Are you interested in the paranormal, ghosts, UFOs, or psychic phenomenon? Join me, Tim Bartley, co-host of Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, coming mid-January 2017 to the XZBN. We will channel spirits live and talk to them, revealing all kinds of amazing information. Spiritual attachments will be found and removed on the show, and so much more. To find out when you can listen to Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, visit www.xzbn.net for listeners on both sides of the veil.
Welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. John Lee Schneider is my special guest. We're talking about extinction and cloning dinosaurs. Rob in Scarborough would like to know if there was enough blood samples taken out of mosquitoes that are found in amber. Would it be possible to clone dinosaurs like they did in Jurassic Park?
Well, it has to do with if they did have enough, that's really what the qualifier would be.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that you would need a large amount of insects to draw upon. The one test that yielded DNA from an insect trapped in amber is subject to a little bit of scrutiny because it may have been a contaminant. There's only been 5 tests run, and 4 have failed. It was the first one that actually produced the DNA, but the subsequent tests were not able to come up with anything at all. So it really is a matter of coming up with a large quantity of it. And in the case in Jurassic Park was a billionaire that was doing it for profit.
Right.
In the case of an amusement park.
Is it possible that some scientist somewhere in the world has already cloned a dinosaur?
Anything is possible. I suspect that someone would have gone public had they done it. Although, ironically, that's one of the subjects of the earlier books in the series, where they clone some of these and they get released into the wild, and that's where they gain a foothold. an introduced species sort of thing, a little bit like the pythons down in the Everglades.
All right, now what about the aliens? Where did they come from?
Well, in this particular book in the series, the aliens, we've nicknamed them UFOs, as the characters in the book call them, but they're presented as a fairly straightforward War of the World type invaders. In my own little fictional world, however, they do have a little bit of a backstory. Several years before I wrote Extinction, I wrote what amounted to a take on the creature from the Black Lagoon, and the monsters in that turned out to be aliens.
Oh, interesting.
So the approach that I took there, that these aliens were not explorers, they were not tradesmen, they were essentially what amounted to this species' version of scuzzy old mountain transients slumming it out in unpopulated reaches of space, essentially not much more than pirates. But these would have been the first to document our planet in some little lonely corner of the galaxy for the larger interstellar community. And once our resources were cataloged, eventually the strip miners would come. And that's what these aliens are presented as.
How accurate would you say that the science is in this story?
Well, I like to say that it's every bit as accurate as Star Wars science. But the science you have to start from a realistic ground note. And that, you need to have, that there to bring the reader in. The dinosaurs are actually presented very realistically. There's a lot of research behind them. There's very little that is wrong, or at least impossible, in the presentation of dinosaurs. And anything that varies from known scientific fact, I've chalked up to genetic alteration. So,
what kind of genetic alteration?
Well, a lot of this stuff advances on ideas that have been put to the test. There are examples of dinosaurs that have larger brains, and they've extrapolated a humanoid-type dinosaur with large eyes and large brains that stands upright and lost its tail.
Right.
Some have been bred for gigantism, and some have been given the ability to talk. And this is one of the ones, actually one of the really realistic little nuggets of science fact that is inserted into it, because if you look at it as birds, the descendants of dinosaurs, talking dinosaurs, exist today in the form of parrots and mynah birds. So that is actually one of the more accurate parts of the story.
When you put it like that, it doesn't seem like science fiction.
Well, the story in itself is fiction, but good science fiction always has a lot of science fact.
Now, the T-Rex, apparently he was the tyrant lizard king, but there's been a lot of talks about T-Rex in recent years, how he was a scavenger, and how they have been larger predators found. For example, what was that larger predator than the T-Rex?
There's been a couple of them that are actually larger. It's the biggest meat-eating dinosaurs these days are descendants of Allosaurus. They are called the Carcharodont or shark-toothed carnosaurs. The biggest known member is something called Giganotosaurus, which was down in South America. It means gigantic lizard from the south. And they have a certain amount of parallel evolution that, they do look outwardly very similar to T-Rex. They have smaller forelimbs, they have very large heads, and they did tend to outweigh the T-Rex. The largest specimens of Giganotosaurus do outweigh the largest specimen of T-Rex. However, T-Rex was the last of the dinosaurs to evolve. It was the last species on Earth. And as such, it was a very specialized dinosaur. It had, in addition to the large body size, which was still comparable to the other large meat eaters, it had very powerful jaws. It had adaptations such as binocular vision, it had larger brain, and it had adaptations for speed, which was not shared by the other large meat eaters. So in terms of a face-to-face confrontation between the two of them, it might be considered a pit bull versus a German shepherd, where it would be a much more powerful, for its weight, creature.
Your book puts into perspective the possibility that life here on Earth may have been started by genetic engineering from visitors from another planet.
That's one of those things that comes up from time to time. Personally, I think that's sort of dodging the issue, because it would have had to start somewhere, and just if we were planted by aliens, the aliens themselves would have had to have been planted by someone, and there you got the chicken and the egg thing going.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that life evolves on many different planets. If it evolved on one, it could very easily evolve on the other. On the other hand, there really would be nothing to stop an advanced species to come to a primitive planet and perform experiments and, just to see what would happen. I mean, we've certainly done stuff in our own third world, and we've done stuff like that in our own wilderness.
Right. So life as we know it, do you think actually evolved as a process as depicted here on this planet?
I have heard it compared to the process of crystallization. It's the same on the moon as it is on Mars. If you put the right elements together, it's like raising bread dough. It happens. It's like I think Michael Crichton described it as a self-organizing process. That if you put the right elements together, it will happen. And with all of space out there, it seems like a lot of opportunity for that to happen.
It's just so hard to imagine. Well, maybe for you it's not, but I'm sitting here thinking, all right, well, how much blood would they have to get from the mosquitoes in order to clone a dinosaur? Are we talking a couple of drops? Are we talking a milliliter? What are we talking about here in quantity?
I probably couldn't come up with an exact quantity, but you would need something to give at least the entire DNA strand. Now, that is a very small quantity. You can get DNA from, you can get it from bacteria, and that's why some of the DNA which has been extracted from amber has been subject to question, because, they can't prove that the DNA that they have recovered was from an animal that was, bitten back in the Cretaceous period. It could have been something that was contaminated right there on the desk. But it would have to be a very small amount, actually. But the problem, in order to get the entire DNA strand, especially something that was 70 million years old, it is subject to decay. And so, like, if you get a piece of it, you might get half a piece, you might get a quarter piece, or very much less. So, and then especially if you have several different specimens, you might have the DNA from several different animals. So, I mean, there would be the problem there.
All right, but let's take it from the soft tissue within the bones of a dinosaur.
That has yielded much more potential because, first of all, everything you find within the dinosaur bone would be from the same animal.
Exactly.
It wouldn't be a case, and you would, and the other thing is that you would know what animal it is to be from the start. The T-Rex, which was broken, they found a lot of things from that T-Rex. First off, they discovered that it was a pregnant female, to do with growth tissues that are only present in laying birds. And they have also discovered that they've found, I mean, as they said, they've gone into other thigh bones and which is one of the largest bones in T-Rex. They've gone in and they've discovered similar tissue in other specimens. So they've reached a point where they actually have access to what might be sufficient material to do it.
It's quite interesting. Just imagine that, cloning a dinosaur and bringing in the past back to life.
I certainly hope someone tries it.
Yeah. Can you just imagine the possibilities? Maybe we could get a... Pardon?
Once you got that going, really, you could eliminate extinction for endangered species. I mean, if you had, whales that were dying,
That's right.
It would be something where you could, go a long ways to eliminating world hunger, especially in areas like where fishing has dried up because of dead zones and climate change. It has unlimited potential.
When we come back from this commercial break with the news, John, I have a couple more questions from the listeners. John Lee Schneider is our special guest, and his website is www.crossquarter.com. That's www.crossquarter.com. And we'll be back on the other side of this news break as the X Zone continues live and around the world from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Talkstar Radio Network. Don't go away.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
John Lee Schneider is our special guest. We were talking about his book Extinction, and during the commercial break, I was just thinking that, the possibilities that lie ahead in our future to resurrect the past are just phenomenal. Just imagine being able to bring back someone from the dead.
You could bring back the physical body of someone from the dead, but it would be a case of, for example, bringing back a person from the dead. It would be similar to, it would be a whole new person. It wouldn't have the personality or the soul or any of the life experience of the person you were trying to clone. It would basically be a copy of the person. It would, on the other hand, present a lot of possibilities for things like organ transplants, limb, that sort of thing. But yeah, as far as bringing back a person, you couldn't, for example, resurrect Beethoven and expect to come up with like a whole bunch of new music. So, because that would have been something that he would have had to have learned during his lifetime.
All right, but let's take a look at, the prehistoric men that they're finding that are frozen. Thawing them out to a point where you can actually extract DNA and clone them. Would we be cloning a Neanderthal, or would we be cloning a modern-day man? You would be, well, I mean, if you consider the Neanderthal a different species, which is what I believe most scientists do, you would be cloning a Neanderthal man. Now, as I said, it wouldn't be the exact man. It would be like the equivalent of a twin brother. So it would not be a Neanderthal man that would have had memories of being living among mastodons and all that, but it would be a genetically identical copy of that man. I wonder if there's going to be a time where you can actually clone memories as well. Well, Arnold Schwarzenegger did a movie, something like that, a few years ago, where they had what amounted to a genetic photograph of a person's memories. Was that Total Recall? Again, no, that was, I believe, the Sixth Day. Oh, right. Yes, and that was a case. But once again, it was also a case of you had another one and you would have copied the memories. It might be an exact copy, but the person that you're cloning would still be dead. It would not be. In fact, they had a scene in the movie where one of the actual person was dying and was able to talk to the clone that was going to replace him. So, it would be a case of it would be another scenario of a twin brother, although it would be a closer match since you were able to record the memories and past of the person being cloned. What's next in the series after Extinction? Well, there are 2 more books in the series. There were 3 that preceded it. The immediate follow-up is a book called Space Dragons, as opposed to the Earth Dragons, and this deals with a plague of monsters that actually try to eat the planet.
And moving beyond that to the final book in the series, escalating, they have a monster that eats the entire universe, which makes more sense once you read it. But
talk about a heavy appetite, huh?
Oh, yes, it keeps getting bigger.
What inspired you to be an author?
I was always into the pulp science fictions as a kid. I really liked the H.G. Wells books.
Mm-hmm.
The Time Machine, for example, was one of my all-time favorites. The War of the Worlds, obviously, was a good one. First Men in the Moon, I could go on for that. Edgar Rice Burroughs, who did a lot of dinosaur stories in addition to Tarzan and a lot of that. My modern inspiration, Stephen King actually was a big one because I like his writing style, first of all. I like the way he was able to ground what seemed like impossible scenarios in reality, and which made the things that were going to be scary much more. You were much more able to accept them. So, and plus he did it with a sense of humor, and that was able to actually heighten the tension because you actually found yourself liking the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Crichton.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go.
Michael Crichton was an influence in terms of his scientific thought. I really am impressed with the amount of research that he does for his books. And I actually enjoyed Thomas Harris books you probably know him best from the Silence of the Lambs series, which was very direct style of writing. That really is more a stylistic influence as opposed to a content thing. But those are the primary inspirations.
What was it like after coming up with a concept, writing it, submitting it, doing the rewrites, and then seeing your book in print? Your very first book in print, yeah.
When I actually got the letter that it was in print, I had received so many rejection letters, I didn't even expect it. I picked up the letter that said, okay, we've decided to publish your book,
mm-hmm.
and I read it and reread it, and yeah, that's what it says. And and once I got in the book, I called everybody, and everybody bought a copy. It was even got a few signed out there. It was really a neat experience.
What words of inspiration would you have for someone listening tonight who's been thinking about writing a story and they've just held back? How would you inspire them to get their thoughts on paper?
First, you just have to dedicate. It's like doing anything
mm-hmm.
that you want to do. You have to commit yourself to doing it. Writing a book is a lot of work. It really is a time-consuming process. Getting published is actually even more so. When I wrote my first book, I guess as a kid, I would have been probably about 18 years old, just out of high school. I just assumed that, I'll send it in to someone and they'll print up a copy and, that'll be that. But there are many, many things that you actually have to learn besides writing the book itself, which is no easy task. When you write something on paper, you have to, first of all, think it out in advance. There's the actual writing process, but then you have to get opinions from people. You have to let people read it and see if they are actually understanding what you're writing. It's very difficult to imprint your thoughts on another person. I always like to use the example of giving someone that doesn't know how to drive written instructions how to drive a car down the street. How easy would that be to describe? So it's like anything, any skill, you need to put work into it to develop it. And then once you've actually got the product, which would be the book, you have to learn how to present it. You have to pick out your market. You have to find publishers that publish the type of stories that you write. You also have to present it in such a way that seems professional. And then you also have to do something that gets the attention of the publisher that says, why should I publish this as opposed to the other 100 manuscripts which I saw today? And it's a matter of being struck by lightning. It's being in the right place at the right time. But, the right time is in the lap of the gods, but anybody can work their way to the right place and wait.
One question I've got from Sally, who listens to us in Wichita. She'd like to know, why do little boys have such a fascination with dinosaurs?
I don't know that it's just little boys, because I had one as a little boy, and I still have one as a grown man. But I think it's because they're big, they're scary, they're like the monsters you see on TV, except that these guys are real. And I think that really is it in a nutshell. Plus, they have, exotic, scary-sounding names, with 12 syllables. Argentinosaurus, Triceratops, Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's just an exciting subject.
Got another question here. Would a woolly mammoth be easier that was found in the Arctic to clone?
They ought to be able to do that if they want to. They have the entire carcass. I saw a special on the Discovery Channel where they were talking about doing that, but it's a matter of someone spending the money, and which would probably be quite a costly process. But it really should be no more difficult to clone woolly mammoth, which has been pretty much frozen for less than 10,000 years, I would guess. They would probably have all the genetic material they need. So, right. It probably could be done today.
Just imagine that. Imagine going to the zoo and seeing a woolly mammoth. That would be so cool.
Well, we essentially got elephants, which is a very close relation.
Yeah.
The woolly mammoth was obviously adapted to a colder environment, so it would have had hair, but there isn't a lot of difference between that and the modern elephant.
Well, you're right. Once again, animals adapt better to the climate than humans do.
Pardon me?
I said animals adapt better to a change in climate than humans do.
Well, humans have a tendency to adapt the climate to them. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to build a house and build a fireplace inside it, whereas animals will evolve or else they'll migrate. Birds, obviously, fly south for the winter because it's warmer there. On the other hand, evolution is a longer process, so if things get cold, there could be species that die out, and they may have descendants that survive, that grow hair and things that might be more adapted to a colder environment or a warmer environment, or whatever it would be. We've actually, because of our brains, have moved beyond the necessity to actually have physical change.
One of our listeners writes me and says, "Hi Rob, I've been listening to you and John discuss the dinosaur cloning, and wouldn't it be beneficial to science if they were to take an entire dinosaur skeleton and just try and get as much DNA out of this skeleton as possible, regardless of the cost, because then you could actually clone a living dinosaur? Which scientist would not want to do this?"
Well, first of all, there aren't a whole lot of dinosaur fossils out there. We are talking about something that, for example, I believe Sue, the T-Rex, sold for something in the region of $7 million. So we are talking about and also something not just valuable but irreplaceable. So there's a lot of research and knowledge that can be gained from just the skeleton in itself. And at this point, it's still a bit of a long shot to get the genetic material out of the bones, because, as I said, it was something that they did not believe possible until they actually looked at it. And also, there are bones, for example, like the smaller vertebra bones, which might be big by human standards, that would not be necessarily, like a thigh bone, which is where they found the genetic material in the T-Rex, is a large bone. Some of the smaller ones might not have stuff as well preserved, and so it would be a case of destroying the fossil for no reason. So, but I believe that it's something that people are going to look into, and as they've done with some of the other thigh bones, they have discovered that, okay, there is a little bit here. Whether it is enough to work with yet remains to be seen.
Here's an interesting question. Why do we need to study dinosaurs? They were here, they're gone, that's it.
Well, first of all, it is an interesting subject. There's things that you can learn about the modern world. For example, why did they go extinct? Because every species eventually goes extinct. We're talking about a species, not just necessarily species, actually an entire genre of animals that existed on the planet for 150 million years. Now, we as a species as a recognizable human have been on the planet for around 30,000. So, I mean, you're talking about a very successful clan that, in fact, still exists today in the form of birds. I mean, just on the strength that they were very interesting.
Right.
That's something like I mean, that's primarily the reason I studied them. But there is value that you can get out of learning from the past. I mean, the same as you can learn about human history, you can learn about what's going on in the world today.
All right, stand by, John. You and I have to take our final break. John Lee Schneider is our special guest. His website is www.crossquarter.com. That's www.crossquarter.com. And for all you people out there with iPods, the X Zone will be available at the App Store on iTunes starting August the 22nd. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone, live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network. Don't go away.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
19th Sergeant Central. 19th Sergeant, check. Officers on the scene.
Hi, I'm Larry Lawson, host of Paranormal Stakeout. With over 36 years in law enforcement, I have learned a few things. The most important is the proper gathering and preservation of evidence is vital to putting the bad guy behind bars. It's no different in the world of paranormal investigation. Whether it's the search for the afterlife, cryptozoology, UFOs, and extraterrestrials, how we gather the evidence, preserve that evidence, and present it to a jury of our peers will make the ultimate difference in proving the existence of worlds and entities that are beyond our imagination. Join me, Larry Lawson, every week on Paranormal Stakeout when, along with my guests, we'll take a journey to prove with indisputable evidence what man has struggled to believe for centuries. Go to xzbn.net for the broadcast schedule and check me out at paranormalstakeout.com.
True healing must address 4 levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, for us to live joyful and productive lives. We tend to treat 3 of the 4, leaving the spiritual languishing. If you're tired of the same dysfunctional patterns cropping up in your life, Soul Balancing is for you. Trixie Phelps, owner and founder of Soul Balancing, is a naturally gifted energy healer trained in numerous esoteric forms, including shamanism. Trixie has created a powerful modality that safely and effectively clears your energetic field. A soul balancing session can remove interference, heal trauma, and restore your hope. Contact Trixie for a life-changing long-distance session today. www.soulbalancing.world.
John Lee Schneider is our very special guest. He's the author of Extinction. His website is www.crossquarter.com. That's www.crossquarter.com. John, over the break, I received a note from one of our listeners saying, "Hey, Rob, why couldn't they take the DNA from that so-called Sasquatch that was found in a freezer in Georgia and grow a real Sasquatch?" Well, that's because they didn't get any DNA from the so-called Sasquatch. All it was a bunch of media hype. Tom Biscardi was there. It was literally a commercial for his internet radio show. And, you know, there he is. He wants to do an autopsy, have it filmed. And it's shades of alien autopsy all over again. So that's my opinion on that. Robert W. Morgan and I will be talking about the press conference as well as the find of this Bigfoot and some interesting facts that we found out about the gentleman who found Bigfoot. That's in hour number 4 tonight, coming up in 2 hours from now. John, thanks very much for joining us. It's certainly been a pleasure. I wish you much success, and hope that we have the pleasure of talking to you again in the future.
All right. Thank you very much.
Now, before you go, I have to ask you, what is your favorite dinosaur?
Oh, absolutely, Tyrannosaurus Rex.
He's the big meat eater, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, still king of the dinosaurs.
I don't know. When I was a kid, I liked the Brontosaurus for some reason.
Oh, Brontosaurus is there too, but
yeah.
T-Rex has got to be my number one.
And then, of course, one of our listeners just sent me an IM saying, "Hey, don't forget the Flintstones, Rob. They kept the dinosaurs alive."
Very good.
All right, you take care of yourself, sir. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thanks a lot.
Good night, John. John Lee Schneider, www.crossquarter.com. When we come back from the news at the top of the hour at 6.5 minutes past, I will be joined by Elizabeth Joyce. We're going to be talking, Exo Nation, about psychic attacks. Are psychic attacks responsible for the increase in domestic violence, the increase of shootings, the increase in murders? Is it possible that forces beyond this realm of reality have decided to make their presence known by using psychic attacks? Or is it the will of people in this reality, people that you and I call friends, neighbors, acquaintances? Are they responsible for the increase in psychic attacks? What is a psychic attack, and how can we protect ourselves from being attacked by other people who are after our psychic abilities? Not the abilities to see the future, but the ability to bring us down. That's coming up in the next hour with our good friend Elizabeth Joyce. And as I said, the final hour of tonight we'll be talking about Bigfoot. They had that press conference in Palo Alto this afternoon. Every major media is calling it a hoax. Bigfoot researchers are calling this whole thing a scam, a hoax. After all, Tom Biscardi is nothing more than a Las Vegas promoter. That's all he is. That's what his expertise is. And he saw Bigfoot as a way of milking people from their hard-earned money. More of the X-Zone when we come back on the other side of this commercial break with the news, when Elizabeth Joyce joins me at 6.5 minutes past the hour. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone. My producer tonight at the Master Control in White Springs, Florida, is the one and only Newbie. We'll all be back on the other side. Don't go away.